Okay, so let us delve into the Rape of the Lock. And the Rape of the Lock, as I mentioned in the kind of background video, is a mock epic that takes that happens in 5 parts. And I'm only asking you to read the first 3 parts, which I think are the you kind of get the gist of the poem based on reading those 3 things. So before we begin, however, there are a couple of things that I want to talk about in order for you guys to understand the poem. And the first one is this idea of women in society, particularly in an 18th century kind of mindset. And if you remember in the background info on Pope, I said that he was considered to be a misogynist, both by our standards and kind of 18th century standards. But particularly these kind of ideas for women in the age would be for, I mean, her goal, as it has been for the last, 2 units that we've talked about, the goal was for women to get married and have children, right? And in order to do that, they would have to find the most suitable match. And usually that suitability would depend largely on financial security, right? It wouldn't have to do so much with, oh, I love him, he's really good to me, he treats me really well, but more so about the advantageous nature of the marriage in terms of land, title, or money. So keep that in mind. And usually, in order for the woman to make the most suitable match, it would largely depend upon her chastity or her honor, right? Because this loss of virtue would mean the loss of a chance at a good marriage. And we've seen this time and time again, I think, particularly with our Cavalier poets when they were telling, to his coy mistress, right? See the day, I want you to love me, but there's no offer of marriage. And Catherine Phillips in The Marriage State kind of rails against that idea because for a woman her only kind of currency, besides the fact that if she had money or a title or whatever, she's only as good as her virtue, for better or worse. I mean, talk about double standard. But the other thing worth mentioning, though, is that for Pope, women are considered vain, proud, and worried about trivial matters. And part of that comes with you'll see when we talk about the prefatory letter. So the other thing that I want to mention is kind of the title of the of the poem, "The Rape of the Lock," and that's kind of sort of this ironic title, right? Because rape is to be something. I mean, like when you think about rape, it's something incredibly serious and terrible to think about, right? But the rape of a lock, right? It's the stealing of or the violation of a lock of hair. And while that does seem kind of trivial to us today, and in some regards to an 18th century audience, a lock of hair was pretty important because it was a token of affection. And in a lot of regards, if a woman bestowed upon a man a lock of her hair, that was significant because it symbolized an intimate relationship, an understanding between a man and a woman. And in other words, it kind of signified that they were engaged by all standards of society. So taking this lock is kind of violating all of those kind of social mores. So keep that in mind. But the lock of the hair is pretty significant because it's something that a woman has to offer that would, societally speaking, symbolize something of much greater importance. So we talked in the background video, or I talked, you guys listened, about this being an example of a mock epic. And for I mean, Pope really kind of brings the house down with this mock epic because not only does he parody the people of society, he parodies the poetry that he's um, imitating. And he does that in a variety of different ways. And I'm going to go through some of those with you as we talk about the poem. But the mock epic, right, or this kind of satirizing is something that you guys are familiar with because you did read The Nun's Priest Tale. And the central incident of this poem, as we talked about in the background, is based on a real life incident, and this it finds its way into the poetry. But this real life incident where a guy named Mr. Petrie cuts off the lock of hair of this beautiful socialite woman, Arabella Fermor, has very serious implications and backlash for these two very prominent families in society. They have this feud caused by the taking of Arabella's lock has social, religious, and familial implications. And Pope's goal here is to kind of ease the tensions between these two families, right? By placing this incident in this mock epic framework, Pope hopes to show that this taking of the lock is trivial in order to reconcile these two families. And no doubt he fails in his purpose because I think it does more to ruffle feathers than it does ease those waters. But um, nevertheless, this work gives the reader somewhat kind of of enjoyment or pleasure, or it would have to a normal modern or contemporary society of Pope, because it was kind of those celebrity tabloids of the day, right? So by doing that, though, his ultimate goal and the goal of a mock epic or satire in general was to reform society, to examine this kind of artificial life of the age of these people who stay up all night partying and playing cards and spending so much time at their toilet getting ready, lapdogs, tea drinking, snuff taking, and what he would have seen as idle vanities. And it's not only a satire on society who places kind of this emphasis on these idle pastimes, but it's also a parody of the heroic style of poetry, um, which I think is pretty interesting. So um, I think in the grand scheme of things, and to kind of wrap up what I was saying about this kind of mock epic, is that it really kind of depicts the artificial tone of the age in a playful um, kind of way. So um, on we go to look at the prefatory letter, and the prefatory letter I think is one that Pope does a couple of things, and it's not unlike John Locke's prefatory letter in an essay concerning human understanding. And in a way, it has two functions. And the first function is to kind of indicate to his reader, us, as well as, I mean, he dedicates and writes this letter to Arabella Fermor, the one who has had her hair taken. And I think in a way, he's trying to let her know that this letter or this poem is written for young ladies of good humor and sense. He says, "Yet you may bear me witness it was intended only to divert a few young ladies who have good sense and good humor enough to laugh not only at their sex's little unguarded follies, but at their own, right? So he's saying, I am not writing this to make fun of you. I'm writing this for, other young ladies and hope that they'll see the humor in it. And then he says, I know that you guys wanted to keep this kind of secret or this incident private, but the rumor mill and it's gotten out. So I was forced to kind of write um, this commentary as a way of kind of easing those tensions. He also takes the opportunity in this prefatory letter to explain this kind of use of machinery, this element of the supernatural that we'll talk about when we talk about the Canto 1. And the machinery is simply this idea of sylphs, gnomes, salamanders, things that are in the air, which again we'll talk about. But he takes the time to explain the the origins of how he came to kind of reinvent, re-envision this very arcane philosophy that went out of date in the 16th century, but that kind of also highlights the 18th century ideals of reinventing and resurrecting the ancients. So he talks about that here. And I think that not only is this kind of a way of explanation to the reader, right, what you should find in this letter, the prefatory letter also has a more social function, as well as a literary function. Socially, this letter is written to distance himself from his target, from Arabella, from other women, and kind of ease any hard feelings that she may have, that he's kind of calling her out publicly for being this trivial, vain type of woman, and for making what he says is a big deal over nothing. He's also saying that Belinda is only like you in that she's pretty, right? You're not shallow like Belinda, which I it's a tongue-in-cheek way of distancing himself, kind of like the nun's priest does when he's talking about the things that he talks about. But and literarily speaking, it's an explanation of his work, an explanation of his sources, and ultimately to suggest that this is, no matter how you read it and what you take from it, a work of fiction. So kind of tread lightly. So before we get into our discussion of the first canto, I want to take really just a few minutes to talk about the key characters that we see in this canto, because I know that it's confusing. It's confusing. So Ariel is one of our characters. He is the head sylph, the guardian sylph that is in charge of Belinda's chastity. It is his job to take care of Belinda. And Belinda, of course, is our beautiful heroine who is a shallow, vapid, aristocratic woman who is out to do the best she can in the marriage market. But I wonder, like, who can blame her if that's, the society that she's, kind of pegged into. Who can blame her for making the most of the situation that she's in? So she is out on the marriage market, and the Baron is a suitor for Belinda, but also in this kind of battle between the sexes, the battle that is the kind of marriage market. He is Belinda's adversary. She wants to get the upper hand of him, so to speak, which I think that is not necessarily something that is new to either the 18th century or us as a modern audience. This idea of the battle between the sexes. So also in this poem we have Clarissa. And Clarissa is kind of one of those frenemies where she is vying for the Baron's attention and wants to kind of have the Baron for herself, and kind of get his attentions away from Belinda. She is an older woman with more experience in society, and we will see that she is the giver of the scissors. She enables the Baron to take Belinda's hair. And then, of course, we have Shock, who is Belinda's little lapdog that she loves and cherishes. So I am going to pick up here. I'm going to stop here and I'm going to pick up with a look at Cantos 1 and 2.